Going home after a long trip is great, but you know what's even better? Clicking your home button after a long play session and giving yourself a break. Maybe you just want to check the time because you can't afford a clock. Or maybe you're exhausted after going through a long story mode in the game and you've been sitting down watching cutscenes for 10 minutes waiting for it to get back to the game already. Or you could be like me, and you're dealing with a frustrating level that you keep dying on over and over again, and the blissful sounds of your home screen acts like anger management because you can't afford therapy. Either way, the home screen of a console is one of the greatest creations known to man, and it's not up there with cereal straws or Mario Party 7, but it's pretty darn close. And that's the best part about it. It's not necessary at all. Never once have I seen the new console get revealed and think to myself, I wonder what the home screen will look like for this before I spend hundreds of dollars and declare bankruptcy. But there has been times when I see a home screen for a console and I say to myself, okay, I'm not buying that console because their home screen looks like an algebra problem and my tiny brain can't handle it. However, the home screen for a console is very important when you give it a thought. It's the very first thing you see when you get your console. From the moment when you first open the box and boot it up, it's supposed to leave the best impression on the user from the jump, and that's a really big job for designers. You have to manage to balance both, having an inviting home screen and also something that's very functional. It can't be too simple, but at the same time, it has to be broad enough for the more savvy hardcore gamers, but it can't be too complex either or hard to navigate. That makes using the console a pain, and honestly it turns off a lot of people. Somewhere in the middle is the best way to go. Some of the best consoles of all time have found a way to craft well-designed home screens, and if you're stupid like me, having a console that's easy to use but intricate enough to navigate through is the best of both worlds. I mean, think about it. There are systems out there that are just terrible and you can't even figure out how to go to the settings, let alone get to the game that you want to play. You've got menus like for the Xbox Series X, which look like it belongs on a cable box in 2009 with only 4 channels, and they're all dog channels because it's for dogs. There's some systems where it's difficult to navigate, but you can see what the developers were going for, but they couldn't quite hit the mark and were still trying to figure out different things. And they failed. And then you get consoles that manage to figure out the formula. They find out how to have that perfect mix of atmosphere, presentation, and usability. All 3 things that really matter when it comes to making a home screen. It might be stupid because when you sit back and think about it, who really cares about a dumb old menu? Besides dumb old people like me. But they can really make or break a console experience. However, one company that's managed to be a cut above the rest actually has to be Nintendo. With their line of portable and home consoles, Nintendo seems to really put a lot of passion into their menus when they really could have just outright avoided it all and keep it simple. Most kids just want to play their Mario Karts and their Zeldas, but Nintendo's like, no, you need to be able to talk about politics at the age of 5. Nintendo tends to go above and beyond when it comes to stuff like their home screen's user interface. It's almost like everyone at Nintendo graduated from the school of home screen. And Xbox, well, they dropped out, and they're currently making their parents depressed because they never finished school and they're currently mooching off their parents instead of getting a job. But Nintendo, since their early 2000s, have been pushing the boundaries forward for home screens. With the 7th generation of consoles, starting with the 360, Wii, and PS3, home screens start to become an essential part of your video game experience as soon as you turn the console on. But even before some of these consoles were released, it seemed like Nintendo were itching to put a home screen on their console by any means necessary. Nintendo, with their new Nintendo DS handheld, is actually their very first console to have a home screen on it, and it doesn't suck. This was such a great addition to the Nintendo DS line. It really made this console feel like the future of Nintendo, especially when you compare it to the Game Boy Advance released 3 years back, which when you turn it on, it just turns on. No thrills, no fun, it just takes you straight to Shark Tale with no warning at all. I feel threatened. As a first outing, the Nintendo DS home screen really did its best to look as inviting and homely all at the same time. It's like the opposite of my bedroom. But just taking a look at the DS home screen, and you could tell that Nintendo was really doing their best to push a lot of stuff on the user all at once. It's like an overgrown calculator. You've got a clock for telling time, you got a calendar for telling time. Okay, it's not that fun, but it's the small things that really make the experience of having a home screen worthwhile. Just digging around in the settings and switching stuff around, like making a personal message for yourself and saving it for later, or switching the colors around for the home screen. That could be a really fun time too. I chose hot pink because I can, dang it. Stop asking questions. Okay, it's my second favorite color. As a home screen, the Nintendo DS accomplishes a lot outside of just being a place to load your games in. There's the option to do DS download play so you can play a multiplayer game with someone else, a feature that I think is really ahead of its time. All you needed was one game or one cartridge with multiplayer and you could get a bunch of people to play with you. There's also the option to set an alarm. It's not that I'd use it, but could you imagine being late for work because you forgot to set your alarm on your DS? However, no discussion about the DS home screen could be complete without bringing up the holy grail of the DS family line, and that's PictoChat. I'd tell my kids for this to come back, and I don't even have any. Being able to draw and send pictures to your friends next to you or just chat with them, it was pretty much like text messaging before it became a thing. Except you had to be like 3 centimeters away for it to even work. All these different features made the DS really stand out, and it only led for it to be improved upon in the future with the DSi. While the DS brought a lot of really good things to the table, the DSi, well, it is the table. It took stuff from the Wii software and the DS software, put it all together, and made a complete mess. But the best mess possible. I think this home screen is really impressive, especially considering that the DSi was released way back in 2008. And 2008 was perfect because we got Neopet's Puzzle Adventure that year. The DSi home screen looked really ahead of its time though. It's almost as if Nintendo got a glimpse of the future of how smartphones would look like, went back in time and copied it. And in a world where the PSP home screen looked great, but still kind of confusing, I can really appreciate the DSi home screen for being pretty simple and still looking as fresh as ever. It was just a more expansive experience than the DS home screen that we got years prior. One of the most touching additions is the icons for games that you have downloaded onto the system. It's super expressive and it just brings a lot of character to the games in the system itself. It kind of reminds me of the PS2 save files or the save menu from the Sega Dreamcast. It's small stuff like this that really gives a console a lot of its own charm. And as a self-proclaimed connoisseur of charm, the DSi is just at the top when it comes to this. There's even the DSi Shop, which is dead, but let me tell you, when it was alive and kicking, it was pretty much ahead of its time, filled with games called DSiWare that you could download and play. Granted, it took 5 days for a game to even download, but still, it's the thought that counts. Even outside of the menu and the different features that you could play around with, the entire aesthetic of the system was unmatched at this point, and this really worked well with the whole design that Nintendo was going for around this era. That late 2000s, early 2010s clean design that consoles like the DS and DSi just seemed to work so well with was what Nintendo was trying to present themselves as at the time. And it worked! Because even today as a grown man, I just can't seem to let it go. And it's making me depressed. This cohesive use of design is a big highlight for me when it comes to looking back at the consoles of the 7th generation, the DS, DSi, and Wii, all sharing that same look and feel. It looked as if Nintendo was both focusing on design and functionality, something that's really hard to accomplish, especially when it comes to making a console for the casual gaming market. Or in simpler terms, grandmas. I don't think any console accomplishes as much as the Wii. As soon as you turn it on, you're greeted with, well, a warning screen, but then joyful bliss ensues as you peruse probably the best home screen in all of mankind. And yes, I'm considering the PS3 too. The Wii's home screen, in my personal opinion, embodies everything that a home screen should be, and then some. You just have character oozing out of the console with this home screen, whether it's the ambient music or just the theme of everything being a channel. I like that concept so much, especially at the time of its original release where TV was still where everyone huddled around for. It made the Wii feel like the main system in the house, something that overtook the other home entertainment devices at the time. I know because no one cared to watch DVDs with me. The Wii's home screen was just filled to the brim with so much different stuff to do. Even if you didn't have any games to play, there was always something for you to play around with. Especially if you had the internet. And there was just an overload of channels that you could waste so much time with, and I'm ashamed because I could have been spending my time learning something new, but no, I'm too busy trying to figure out how to make a hamburger Mii. There's of course the Mii channel where you could spend countless hours customizing and making your very own Mii characters, and honestly, with a little bit of creativity, it never got boring. But there was also the photo channel where you can mess around and play with different pictures that you have saved onto your Wii. This was such an unnecessary addition, but it's here anyway, and it's surprisingly fun. And then there's the weather and news channels. These channels do nothing but tell you the news and weather, but it's great to have them regardless. I learned about major events through the news channel, and I don't know if that's a good or bad thing. Hey, finding about presidential elections on the news channel from the same system you can play Family Game Night 3 on It might be the greatest accomplishment in history. And then there was the Wii Shop channel, truly one of the best ways to get older and retro games officially. I gotta say that just from the Wii Shop channel alone, tons of people were introduced to classic and retro games that were pretty hard to come by at this time, especially in the early to late 2000s. There was also the internet channel, which is dead, but it acted like a web browser on your TV. Sure, it sucked, but at the same time, it was really neat to see something like this get implemented onto a home system way back then. There are also other channels that you could download from the Wii Shop channel that really fulfilled that Wii experience. Everything about the home screen to me is near perfection, and the next couple of consoles only pushed its design forward. With the 3DS and Wii U era of home screens, they look like an evolution of what the Wii brought to the table, and it was honestly made a bit better too. The 3DS and Wii U felt like an evolution of the aesthetic made popular by the Wii and DS. Of course, there's the ambient music, but there's also a colorful and wide array of different things to do with the home screen. I think the Wii's home screen is probably the greatest Nintendo home menu concept-wise, but I think the Wii U comes super close, and at times I think it surpasses it. Where the Wii felt more like everyone huddled around the TV, the Wii U's home screen just screamed community when a bunch of angry Miis come running after you turn the console on. And this is something that both the Wii U and 3DS excelled at, especially with Street Pass and Miiverse giving you a real sense of other gamers having the same experience as you. One thing about the home screen, unlike the Wii, is that it tried to do a lot more, and some stuff wasn't needed, like Wii U Chat, a video calling app on the Wii U. And you see, we kind of run into a bit of a problem because, who's gonna call somebody on a Wii U? The Wii U's home screen had a lot of software for people to play with, but some were more stupid than others. Like Wii Street, a watered down version of Google Street View. Yes, it's that pointless. And while all this stuff does make the Wii U stand out during this generation of consoles, it's kinda all for the wrong reasons. But at least it still stands out. Even so, the Wii U felt like a much more polished and cleaner experience of the Wii and DS family. It was a bit more slower and things took a long time to load, but the Wii U seemed to be the definitive evolution of what the Wii and DS tried to accomplish and then some. The 3DS line on the other hand had a really good home screen setup too. Stuff like Street Pass, AR games, and Face Raiders always gave us something to do during our downtime. It feels eerily similar to the Wii, but in the best way possible. It's a design that's really missing with the Switch era of Nintendo. Granted, I don't know what the future holds for the upcoming Nintendo consoles, but if it's anything like this, help me. I think that the Switch does an amazing job at loading up games and being extremely quick to use. And that's about it. There's nothing that really screams creativity when I look at it. It just feels like a basic user experience. This home screen could be for any modern day tablet, and I'd believe it. Oh, it does nothing wrong, but at the same time, it does nothing right. It's just so basic and really lacking what made the previous consoles shine. And I think being a tablet might have played a role with this, since Nintendo's really keen on making the Switch software fast enough to load games without a wait time. And while that's really great, a part of me is missing that old flair that the previous Nintendo consoles had. I mean, look at this. Does this look like fun to you? I'm hoping that for the future, Nintendo drops a really powerful console that tries to push the envelope forward for home screens, because I can't keep looking at this with a straight face. Now that I've talked about something as minute as Nintendo home screens, I think it's time for me to up the ante and talk about something more complex and mentally stimulating. And I've got it! Here's my list on the most hairiest Nintendo characters. And at number 10, it's Tom Nook.